Hi everybody and welcome to this session that is all about layers of invisibility. In the time that we are practicing social distancing, actually how are we making sure that as a community we're not distancing ourselves and we're bringing each other into the tent and lifting each other up as a really broad community rather than just the few. I have some amazing panelists today with me. I have Noor and I have Nuala. I will let them introduce themselves. So Noor, if you could.
Hi everyone, my name is Noor. Basically Noor is an Arabic word which means light. I have been in telecom industry for 20 years. It's sad, I know. But here we are, and kind of gives away my age a little bit, but okay. I was born for an Egyptian family, a Muslim Egyptian family in Saudi Arabia, and grown up in Egypt. Had a bit of a struggle, personal struggle, that lasted pretty much my entire life until 5 years ago, where I started to pursue my transition, gender transition, quite effectively and actively. And we are here today.
Thanks, Noor. And I know already that people will have a million questions and you've set it purposely for so much enticing stuff to come. Nuala.
Hello, I'm Nuala and I'm 58 years old and 58 and about a week or two, quite early in my 58. And for me, the importance of saying, hello, I'm Nuala and I'm 58 and not even a quarter, is to say and be proud and embrace all that I am and all the experience I have. And the reason I'm here today is because I set up a festival, a film festival for older women, because I think as we get older, in a lot of cultures, not all cultures by any means, but here in Britain for sure, as people get older, but I would say more specifically as women get older, they get more and more marginalized and more invisible. So claiming my full 58 and a wee bit years is a difficult thing, particularly for women to do. But I'm trying really hard to say it out loud and say it with pride, because I think we all have lots to offer. And why would we stop being creative, working, part of the community, interested in politics, just because we're over 50 or over 50 or over 60? So that's my stick.
Brilliant, thank you. And again, I know that people already will have 1,000 things they want to ask you. Nora, I'm going to come back to you because one of the things that we've learned from the survey that we did as the start to this week is that people have really talked about the importance of seeing people like them when they were younger, when they grew up, the sense of I'm not alone, I'm not the only one. And I'm guessing from your experience growing up in Saudi Arabia, that might have been much harder than for other people.
It was painful. It was painful because I've always asked myself, what is wrong with me? Because I see everyone around me, everyone is happy, everyone is, just enjoying themselves absolutely fine. And I'm like, there's something wrong. I even asked my mom, what is wrong with my body? And I remember that very clearly when I was around 5 or 6 years old. So to continuously question yourself and not knowing, not having the vocabulary to articulate what you're feeling or why you're feeling the way you're feeling is making you feel isolated and lonely and subject to bullying in so many ways. Once you start going out and seeing people, and so I was very lucky around 12 or 13 years old when I had access to the internet. And I started browsing and lo and behold, people are sharing their experiences. And I knew what I was going through has a meaning to it, has a diagnosis, has all sorts of ecosystem around it, and I was very jealous. But I knew that I'm okay. I am who I am meant to be. and this is why it's very important that we have that level of visibility, so that people can always see someone who has been ahead in the journey. And I always believe that you cannot be who you cannot see. Yeah, so hence visibility is crucial, and this is why we're here. And because the lack of visibility in my time made it very difficult for me. Hopefully we can make it better for the future generation.
And what about now, Noor? Obviously, you've gone through that transition, and you're really well respected, and you're doing amazing things. But you are a non-UK national in a very difficult time around politics and increasing racism and increasing transphobia. Where are you now with that sense of visibility or invisibility?
It gives me the urge to be more visible. So when things go bad, you have two options. Either you stand for yourself, you be more visible, you stand out and say no, or you just fade away. The choice is really yours. My choice is a matter of, you know what? I'm done. I'm done with that. I'm done with being invisible. I'm done with trying to blend in. Rather than, if I'm going to stand out, well, I'm going to even dye my hair in purple. Tough stuff. So I choose to go out and loud, and even try to encourage some changes in, for example, in the Church of England. I'm considering ordained ministry in the Church of England, because I see people, especially the LGBT community, kind of trying to, or kind of pushed away a little bit by the more conservative atmosphere. And so if we want to make a change in the church, well, only us can do it. So I was like, okay, you know what? Let's do it. Let's get it done. And again, it's all about being visible. It's all about standing out for everyone, not just for yourself. Because we're more than just a label or two. We're a whole host, a huge host of things blended into one being.
Brilliant. And I guess that makes me absolutely think of you, Nuala, that sense of, if you want to make a change, you've got to get out there and do it. And that sense of invisibility urging you on to do something quite radical. Talk to me about your journey from realizing that as women in our community get older, they do become less visible, and what urged you to then set up WAF.
Just before I go there, I just want to say something to Noor, and then I'll probably have forgotten your question, so I don't need to come back to me on that. When you were speaking there, Noor, I thought of a poem that I knew years ago. I can't remember it all, but the very first line is, "When I'm old, I shall wear purple." This idea that as a woman, we're encouraged to think about beige and fading and all those things. And this poem is specifically about purple, which really made me think of you there with your purple hair. So I think you were asking about why it was that I set up WAF, and about what this invisibility, how it manifests itself for me. So my background is I'm a writer. I've written mostly for theatre and radio. I worked for a long time for the BBC World Service, where I wrote a soap opera for English language learners called The Flatmates. And then I wrote for Radio 4 and for theatre. And then I created my first short film. And by then I was in my early 50s. And, you write what you know. I wrote a short film, loosely based on my perception of how my mum was living, how it was for my mum living with my dad who had dementia. And so it was a story about a woman who was well over 50. And I was the writer and producer of the short as well. And part of the producer's job is to try and get your short into short film festivals. So I started going to short film festivals, and what I began to see, or rather not see, was anybody who looked like me, or looked like the stories I was trying to tell on the screen. And as Noor, as you said, about, you've got to be able to recognize yourself in other people. You want to see representations of yourself on screen or on TV or on stage or in industry or in schools or in the church, wherever you're looking at. So I wasn't seeing much representation of older women and older women's stories on screen when I went to these short film festivals. But the thing that really came home to me was when I was in the bar afterwards, which was a venue that I'm very comfortable and very easy with, having experienced some sort of art in a gallery, in theatre. You're in the bar afterwards. I'm not shy. I'll talk to anyone. What did you think of it? And we'll strike up a conversation. And I'm not very highfalutin, but I've got opinions about whatever it is I've seen. And what I noticed in these short film festivals was, for the first time in my life, I would be standing there with a cup of tea or whatever in the bar, and I could see people's eyes in the room kind of scan the room. They'd go up over my head and round the rest of the room. And it was the first time I had really experienced that invisibility of the older women. And it completely sideswiped me. And I wasn't, for quite a while, I wasn't quite sure what it was I was feeling. And eventually I figured it out, and it was shame. I was ashamed that people didn't want to talk to me, and I felt lonely, and it was just an entirely new feeling for me. And I thought, oh, so this is what invisibility feels like. It was like I had an invisibility cloak around me. And sure enough, I felt angry and ashamed and just kind of out of the loop, like I didn't belong. And then with a pal over a pint, we were chatting. She said, what's happening with your film? And, I hear you're going to film festivals. And I said, I don't know what it is, but I think I don't fit in. And I think my film doesn't fit in. And that evening, we said the immortal words. We said, bugger it, why don't we set up our own film festival? And that was more than 5 years ago. And what I've learned in the process is that old adage, the personal is political. And if you say the thing that you are really feeling inside, that you're maybe a bit embarrassed to say, actually that is when people come back and say, oh, do you know what, I feel that too. Or I understand because I've got a similar experience, because Noor, you've not got the same experience as me, but we've clearly got things in common and we can relate to each other. So that's the start of the journey. And why I thought it was important to not fade into the background, because I'm still here, I'm still queer, and I've still got stories and films that I want to see and make and celebrate.
And having experienced some of the work that you're doing, it's amazing, and I would 100% recommend people to get involved. And I guess I want to pick out something you said there, because as a person with a disability, and as a person who, when I first acquired my disability, one of the big challenges for me was just having no concept of what life with a disability was like, because I had nobody in my life that I'd ever really spoken to with a disability. But sometimes I get frustrated with that otherness, with that, we don't need to accommodate you in this space because there's disability pride, or there's this, there's para pride, or there's something else going on for people with a disability over there. So we don't need to worry about that. That's not our problem. How do we make sure that when we're tackling our invisibility by providing something specifically for people like us, we aren't taking away the responsibility from the main community in providing for us as well? Feel free to answer. Nuala, I think you've probably got an immediate answer. I'm going to give you some time to think now.
Well, one of the things that immediately strikes me about all this online work that's happening, and I know that we've, set this up on the hoof and all that, but one thing that we can immediately take on board is making these sessions more accessible, and that's about providing subtitles. And I've got some experience of that, and that's why I wanted to speak about that. And that's an example of how you can make things accessible to lots of people, and it doesn't take away, if I don't need subtitles, it doesn't take away anything from me, and it means that more people can come in. The reason that I'm particularly up on subtitles is because of because of personal experience and talking to a lot of people at our film festival, and they said that they really enjoyed either foreign language films or English language films that had subtitles on them. And I started to hear from people, and then I reflected on my own life, which is quite often I have the subtitles on telly, either because the dialogue's a bit mumbly, I'm getting older, or there's just some line I didn't quite catch, and you want to go back and then I did some research and found out that I think it's 40% from Action on Hearing Loss. I think about 40% of people over 50 are living with some hearing loss. And it's something that comes upon us gradually, so we don't really notice it. And I thought, well, actually, we should be having subtitles on all the films at WAF. And so through an award from the National Lottery, for the last couple of years, we've had all 50 shorts subtitled, and then anything else that we do, our trailers or anything like that, you know, we engage a lovely group called the Film Bunch, and they create subtitles. So that's a long way to answer the question with a kind of practical element that actually we could get these sessions subtitled. I mean, I know that you can put on kind of automatic subs, but they always kind of get them wrong. It's worth paying, and it's important for otherness that we pay money, that it's not always done on the hoof and for free. You know, that we want to say to everyone, deaf and hard of hearing, you are welcome in this space, in this lesbian conversation, in this LGBT conversation, in this film festival situation. So I guess what I'm saying is we can bring in people by making everything we do wheelchair accessible. And, you know, so it's about, I guess it's about planning and thinking about real people that are going to engage with your product or your whatever it is you do. I think that would be one way of looking at it.
Brilliant. And just so you know, we are providing transcripts for this, which I appreciate is not perfect, but I'm a great believer in let's not let perfect be the damage of better. So, you know, it's a step in the right direction. Noor, what about you? What's your view on that?
So I will quote a good friend of mine. Her name is Melissa. She was saying that it's not the job of the outer group to work with the inner group. Yes. And it's not up to only the LGBT people to educate everyone about LGBT, or the people with disability to champion everything for people with disability, or whoever is considered as an other. It's not their job to bring on board everyone else. It's the inner group that need to work together to bring inside the people who are outside. So this is kind of the idea, and it's quite scary how we put someone in the spotlight and, oh, we have a disability champion, or we have a trans champion. Good stuff. Is it really? Not very much, because this kind of risks the concept of tokenism. We have something, yeah, we're done, we're sorted. No, we're not. There's a lot more that needs to be done by everyone to ensure that everyone is on board. And I believe if we collectively as a community, LGBT community and the entire community, fail to take on board everyone, then we all have failed. Not just one of us, not just a group, all have failed.
Yeah, that makes me think of particularly men. I can think of a few other categories as well. But this is just an example. Men who say, oh, I have a daughter, and if this ever happened to her, it would be awful. And part of being in the in group is, I know the personal is political, but if you can look at other people's lives and think, how would I like to be treated? It's not because I've got a daughter that I care about sexism. It's because I want equality in the world. So as well as the in-group thinking about the others rather than the others thinking, it's also about, it's good for the in-group. You know, it's a much nicer world if people are equal. You know, it's I mean, I guess it does depend on your worldview. I think more equality makes it a better world, but I do know there are people who say, no, this is mine and I'm not going to share it. But actually, that makes for a hunched up kind of miserable life. So I also think that it's important to emphasize to the in-group that they're going to benefit if they're inclusive of disabled people and older people and trans people and all. It makes for a nicer room to be in.
Yeah, and also there's one thing that that quickly strikes me. When we talk about generally trying to involve everyone, include everyone, it's not for a business case. It's not for because I have a daughter or a son or a child. It's simply, it's the right thing to do. It's human rights.
Mm-hmm.
It's as simple as that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, but I also think it's I wholeheartedly agree with you, and I get very frustrated, particularly within our own community actually, where we treat inclusion like a pie. Like if I'm included, then it means somebody else can't be, rather than the fact that we can all be included. But I do think sometimes as a community we're not very good at making it safe, helping people understand what would be inclusive, because I think what comes very naturally to us, so for me as a person with a disability, you know, I know the things that make a difference, but it's maybe a little unfair of me to expect other people to know that and to encourage people. I think sometimes we attack people when they get it wrong, or when they've just tried and then wonder why they don't try again. I think there's that middle ground of making it safe for people to say that they don't know, and bringing us in knowing that we'll help and not criticize.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting point you made earlier about having the transcripts, which is like, it's better to have something a bit right than not do anything at all. So that's a really kind of encouraging way that you can get improvements.
Yeah, and also, and this is something that I always also believe in, is there's no right or wrong question. Just ask, really. If you get it wrong, well, tough stuff. Correct yourself and move on. You at least got something out of it. So this is why I keep encouraging everyone, please ask questions. And when I'm in doubt, I also ask questions. So how does it feel to be living with da 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 da? Or how for example, I have a very strong friend of mine, and I asked her when I first learned that she had MS, how does it feel to be living with MS? And she opened up, she was completely honest about it, and I learned a lot from just an open-ended question. So please ask.
The power of curiosity and well-intentioned questions, even if I like to talk about people being clumsily human, you know, rather than we have to know the right words, because let's face it, you know, for me as a person with a disability, what I find offensive, what works for me isn't what works for other people, isn't what other people do or don't find offensive. Nor I want to take you back to that sense of am I right, am I wrong, why is it just me? And I guess I'm curious, I'm being clumsily human, because I'm curious to hear about that transition from a Saudi Muslim family, you know, to a very Western culture.
Ooh, it was quite difficult, because this is the only way I knew things is how it was being done, and everything else is no. And when I was raised in continued my education in Egypt, it was exactly the same. It was slightly open our community-ish, but it was still the same. it was only when I got to have access to the internet, when I had access to travel the world with work, then my eyes opened. Oh, there are other people. There are other people existing in different ways that I knew. And to see how they react together and work together. Well, everyone is accepting. Everyone is who they are. At the end of the day, just be a decent human being, really. That was the underpinning aha moment for me. I remember when I was in a trip to Germany with work, and I noticed one of the ladies that we were sharing table with had a tattoo ring. I was like, so tell me about this tattoo ring. What does it represent? Again, my curious self has always been there. And she's like, yeah, me and my wife are having the same tattoo for our wedding. I was like, oh, wow. Well, I can get used to that. So being raised in a narrow, tunneled vision is quite difficult, and the fact that you're not able to see that there are other things is disempowering and disheartening. And once you have the opportunity to go out and about and learn and be able to unlearn, which is equally important, then you start being what I would classify as a decent human being.
So do you and your wife now have the matching tattoo rings?
No, we didn't get married yet.
Note for film, there's a yet on the end of that sentence.
Yeah.
And Nuala, obviously, you know, you and I are of a similar generation where we didn't have the internet when we grew up. We didn't, you know, have all those amazing things that Nora was just talking about to find those people that weren't in our immediate view. When you were younger, were you ever conscious of older women in our community? I guess I'm thinking, what would you wish the younger members of our community would do differently now that would help inclusion of the older community?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I would. I mean, I didn't come out till I was in my early 30s. So growing up, I didn't think I was really aware of gay culture or lesbians around me. Increasingly, as I look back, and a lot more resources are coming online, and can I big up archive.org? I think it's an American library resource, but there's tons of old TV shows and old black and white films. And I came across the TV series Rhoda. Don't know if you remember Rhoda. And I realized I just had the most massive crush on her. And it's also it's a really funny sitcom. And I had no idea when I was 16 or 17 that wanting to live in New York was actually, I want to be Rhoda's flatmate. You know, I want Rhoda and I to be together. Because she lived with her sister, I realized I wanted to be the wee sister, who is the voice of Marge Simpson. So was I really aware of older people growing up? I mean, the thing is, I think for most young people, anything over 20 or 15 or 20 or even less than that, older, is all lumped together. I remember just thinking my mum and my grandma were kind of almost the same age, you know, and they were probably 30 years apart. So I think when you're younger, it's harder to see older people in kind of separate years. And I think that's part of the language that, you know, we've got words for baby and toddler and preteen and teenager and adult, all these things, and then you're just middle-aged and old. That's your choice. So I think language influences your thinking. So I think when growing up, it was just like kind of, I don't even think I thought of middle age. I think I just thought young and old, and just kind of lumped them all together. But actually, to your question, I can't really think of kind of particular older lesbians. I mean, when I came out, I mean, and I was living in Asia at the time, and then I've lived around the world quite a few places. the kind of bars and places that I was attracted to weren't like nightclubs. They were more like bars and cafes where you could talk to people. And actually the heart of them was often, it was like usually quite a strong core or a single woman who was kind of running the whole thing, and she was usually older. But I haven't really given that a huge amount of thought and don't really have much to say about it.
That's all good. That just means we need to bring you back in a Q&A later in the week to think about it. And I absolutely concur with what you're saying. It's I'm teetotal. I don't drink at all, you know, and I love nothing more. Being a geeky psychologist, I love nothing more than sitting down with a cup of tea and really getting to know people and really, you know, that curiosity. And sometimes when I go to if those LGBT environments I can actually physically get in, it feels very alien. And I think that probably leads me to my last question for you both, which is, you know, these are uncertain times, these are unsettling times. That we talk a lot about the emotional tax of otherness, how that constant feeling of otherness, if you're not conscious in your behaviors and if you're not a hugely optimistic person, can be really damaging and can be really draining. How do you stop yourself from being negative? How do you stop yourself from being that kind of constant kind of bitter voice? How do you keep being, because you're both amazing positive disruptors, how do you keep on that positive side of disruption, which I think many of us would recognize some people in our community haven't managed to do? I'm going to ask you first, Nuala.
And I'm going to answer it with some practical suggestions and a little puff for what's coming up later this week. One of the things that I'm noticing, I definitely have good days and bad days make me tearful and angry in equal measure. And I'm not really sure exactly why I'm crying. I'm more clear about my anger, but it's directed very much kind of way over there. You know, it's not, life has become very small for all of us. So actually what's happening in Parliament or government now seems really far away to me, where it didn't before. But my anger is definitely directed way over there, but it spills out around me. And my tears, again, I'm not exactly sure. It's not like a John Lewis ad that will make me cry. I mean, I will just wake up and cry and I don't know why. And what I'm trying to do is just sit in those emotions. And I had an illness, a serious illness about 10 years ago. And so often people say, oh, but you'll get better, you know. And there was this cheerying up. And because of the constraints that you were the ill person, I was putting a brave face on all the time and saying, yes, it will get better. And actually, sometimes I just wanted to sit in my sadness and my anger, and there's nothing wrong with that. So now this pandemic, that the living through cancer, actually made me ready in a way for COVID, which is I'm angry and I'm sad and I just sit in them. And then I do come round, but maybe I won't, and that's fine too. So that's, again, this is kind of the personal as political. I'm telling you what I do that might help anybody, and might not. I mean, maybe some people want to be cheered out of things. What I've learned about myself is I don't necessarily want to be cheered out. I want to feel the emotions. On a practical note, we're all isolated. A lot of us are alone in a house, or maybe just with one or two people, maybe a cat, a dog, who knows. So one of the things that WAF is doing in this COVID time is we're doing what we call watch-alongs. So WAF selects a feature film, and we're specifically choosing films that are not, that you don't have to pay for to access. So no Netflix, no Amazon Prime. Mostly we're using resources from BBC iPlayer, Film 4, and that archive.org resource that we came across. So WAF selects a film, and we select a film that fits the basic WAF rule, which is it has to have an older woman as the key central character on screen, or an older woman as the writer, producer, or director. So you end up, as WAF and all the films that we show, super inclusive. For example, in our first year, 2 young trans men made a film about a spoken word poet, the trans woman Alice Denny, and that was welcome. So those young trans men were welcome at the festival. A 23-year-old girl can make a film about her 72-year-old grandma, and so everybody is welcome at WAF. But the films that we show must somehow celebrate older women. So the films that we select on a Thursday follow that rule. And the one that we're doing tomorrow night, we kick off at 7 o'clock, and you can follow us on social media to get all the gubbins. We're WO50FF on most social media platforms, but you can also just Google Women Over 50. Be sure to put in Film Festival at the end, because you might get something that you weren't imagining if you go for Women Over 50 on the internet. But the film that we've chosen on Thursday, we've got a real kind of lesbian theme for the evening. So folks at Lesbian Visibility Week might be interested. The film is a Juliette Binoche film. The blurb for the BBC iPlayer film says that she plays a, in inverted commas, a 40-something. Not quite sure why 40-something is inverted commas. Anyway, she plays a 40-something actor who's asked to revive a role where she played a younger woman in a younger woman, older woman relationship. And now she's been asked 20 years later to play the older woman. Juliette was 50 when she played the role. So I think it's interesting that even in a film looking at ageism in 40-something creeps in. So it's a lesbian film kind of in theory. It doesn't actually kind of bring to fruition, but it's still an interesting ageism story. And we also have 2 WAF short films, and one is a fabulous lesbian short, an animation, critical class analysis of the feature film Carol, and it's made entirely with Fisher-Price toys. It's an absolute hoot. So we watch films, and then online afterwards we chat about them. And finally, to go back to your question, Claire, one of the things that I'm missing, and maybe a lot of people too, there are tons of things that we can watch now, but we can't turn to our friends and say, oh, what did you think of that? Oh, I didn't like that bit. Oh, and did you recognize him? And oh, wasn't that funny? That conversation is really missing. And that's what we're trying to do with these watch-alongs, because after we finish watching about 9 o'clock or 9:30 on the Thursday, we get together on Twitter and just chat. It's not any kind of heavy film theory. It's just like, what did you think of the film? Did you like it? Did you not? To try and replicate that conversation that I think some of us are missing.
Brilliant. We'll be sure to tune in and see that. No, what about you?
So first of all, I would like to say I'm in. You got yourself another subscriber, watch along.
Brilliant.
Good stuff.
Send you our newsletter, or you can sign up to it on our website. And that's got the details of everything for Thursday. Oh, good. It'd be lovely to chat to
So for me, the most important thing is to realize when I need help and be able to say, I need help.
Yeah.
And I also kind of encourage others who may be feeling reluctant or feeling a bit isolated. I reach out every once in a while. Hey, how are you? Is there anything in particular you want me to pray for or pray against? So this kind of encourages people to kind of open up, and gives me kind of sense of connectedness with them. So we get to share together. It's okay. We can carry each other along the way. I might need some cheering every once in a while, which is fine. But again, not every time, not everyone needs that cheering, like you, Nuala, said. For me, it's a matter of trying to engage with people, to engage with the community, to engage with the family in the church and the family here, and so it's not to be alone. this is the only thing that I would say to anyone. Don't be alone. You don't have to be alone. The fact that we're physically isolated, we're not. I'm not a big fan of the word social isolation, because we're not socially isolated. We are together. The fact we're together in a slightly different way. It's fine, but we are still together. This is how I kind of build that emotional resilience, not just for me, but for everyone else. For example, yesterday, Lou, my partner, did a barbecue around 10 o'clock p.m. 10 p.m. doing a barbecue outside. I'm like, everyone thought that we're crazy, but hey ho, we're fine. We're enjoying it. So again, be spontaneous, be yourself, and when you need help, just say help. That's it.
Can I just add there, just to go back to what we were saying at the very beginning about how to include everybody. I absolutely agree with you, Noor, that nobody should be alone, but actually I think people are alone. And I think if you're not connected to super fast broadband and you don't have, you know, unlimited data on your phone, and perhaps you're older, and I think there is a vilification actually of older people happening just now, and there's definitely there's a kind of weighing up about whether or not old people are useful or valuable happening, and definitely care homes seen as a scary place to be. I think actually there's a lot of loneliness around, and one of the things that Lesbian Visibility Week and other things, and WAF as well with our watch along, we have to think about people who are not internet savvy, and that's about people who are poor and people who are old, and they are absolutely people on the margins. So I think actually this lockdown, if you've got all this fancy computer Zoom technology, which we are all privileged to have, we can connect, but we mustn't lose sight. And I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how you connect with people at the moment who don't have internet, and I'd be really interested if people have got ideas about ways that we can make those connections, because I know there are lonely people around in this time.
Some of the things that we have been doing, I'm really glad that you said that, I asked that, Nuala, because this is some of the stuff that we're doing within the pastoral care team in our little community. So we ring the phone, we bring people together in the Zoom chat by phone, not by tech. And I have been working on a little something which is basically an Android box which someone can attach to the telly, and they can watch the YouTube channels that we produce and the content that we produce, and they can participate to the Zoom chat, even just listening, so they don't feel alone. They don't need to feel alone with no broadband requirements or whatever. There's a lot of funding, obviously, that needs to have that, and this is where the community needs to carry each other up. Again, I'm privileged to be in such a vibrant community, and this is why I keep encouraging everyone: ask for help, ask and you will be given, seek and you shall find. So yeah, there are opportunities, and again, if we fail to take on board everyone, tech savvy or not, then we failed.
Yeah. So I'm fascinated by the box. So is that your company, and how?
No, it's just any Android TV box. Is just a bit of configuration to it, and making sure it's very user friendly. You can just use the remote like you use anything else, and you're sorted.
Oh, could you leave some details about that on the Lesbian Visibility website? Because I don't know about that, and that would be really interesting.
Cool.
Great.
Yeah, we'll definitely make sure that gets out there, and in a way that also people can understand and really easily access to. So unfortunately that's come to the end of our session, but I think what I've heard really clearly from both of you is that concept of be really conscious about who you're including and who you're not including, and ask, and be creative to think about how can I help rather than how difficult is it going to be. So I really want to thank you both. It's been amazing. Sadly, we're missing our very dear friend Mandy, who was coming on to talk about being a woman of colour, but she's unfortunately not feeling so well today. So we're sending our love, Mandy. We miss you a lot, and we will get you involved in some way soon. But thank you all so much.
And Mandy, if you're feeling a bit sad today, sit in your sadness, and we'll see you on the other side of it. Thanks very much, Claire. Thank you very. It was lovely to meet you, Noor.
Lovely to meet
you in real life someday.
Amen. Yes, please.